Hey, friends. Welcome to Boldly You, the podcast for inspiring stories which consist of daring choices and transformative journeys. From entrepreneurs to everyday heroes, we are exploring the messy and motivating sides of making big changes. Whether it's a career leap or something deep, Boldly You is your go-to for living life unapologetically bold. Now, let's get right into it. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Boldly You podcast. I am your host, Destiny Mackey, and today I am excited to bring on Philippa Scott. She is a family and birth trauma therapist. Thank you so much for being here, Philippa. I have so many questions to ask you today.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, a family and birth trauma therapist, what made you want to do something like that? Tell me a little bit about your backstory, where you got this idea.
So, I guess it's been an evolution for me, a journey that started with my own pregnancies and births, and the journey that I took there, and the journey that took me into the work that I was doing then and do now. So, in a nutshell, my first daughter's birth was what would be called an unnecessarian. It wasn't necessary for me to have surgery, but due to a cascade of interventions, that's where I ended up. Once I got to about that 3-month mark and I got a bit of a handle on being a mum, I was able to start processing how I felt about that situation and learn some more things about what had happened, why it had happened, what my options were for the next baby, and so on. And so, as part of that, I started to learn about the system and how the system is set up and the kinds of experiences that women have in the system and what I needed to do in order to avoid having that happen again and what my choices were. Part of that for me then resulted in being quite angry that had I known the common results of some of the things that I was given option to, I would have said no, but nobody explained to me that having an induction often, leads to an epidural, which can mean the baby doesn't move down, which can often mean cesarean, etc. There are multiple cascades that can occur, but I didn't realize the risk associated with the induction because despite the fact that they're legally required to, often we're not actually told all the risks when it comes to those sorts of things. And I had a girlfriend with me. I had my sister who was a nurse. I had my mum who'd had 4 babies. What I didn't have was anyone who understood the current maternity system and who would help me understand what I was choosing. And I came to realize that a doula could have done those things for me. And so I became a doula because I thought, well, at very least, I'll be able to support other families to not have the same sort of experience as me, to learn and to be supported. So that began my journey. I had a vaginal birth after Caesar, but it was in hospital, and so once again I experienced obstetric violence and the coercion and the fighting that goes along with all of that. I vowed after her birth to never again put myself in that position, and so I went on the lookout for a home birth midwife. There was none available. I had that next baby at home with my support team, which didn't include anybody medical, and it was my by far my most extraordinary birth. It was fabulous. I My intuition said get a midwife for the next one, and I was lucky enough to find a traveling male midwife from Scotland who was traveling around Australia in a caravan with his nurse wife, and so he attended my last home birth, and again, a fabulous experience. What didn't occur, even though I had fabulous experiences, was my nervous system wasn't reset from the original 2 experiences, which had both been traumatic in their own way. Um, or distressing in some ways. I didn't really think of the second one as being traumatic until later when I really had time to sit back and think about it. And we often don't, right? We often mitigate our own trauma to feel like it's not trauma in order to cope. So I started after that first VBAC, which is vaginal birth after cesarean, I began a support group for women who wanted to look at their options for birth after cesarean. I was doing doula work, and eventually, and I got a birth center built up in Townsville with a group of other women. And eventually, I burnt out, and I just felt like nothing I was doing was making an impact. So I went back into corporate world where I burnt out even further, um, having moved so far away from sitting in my feminine. And eventually I developed adrenal fatigue. When I did that, I went looking for, I thought, oh, well, if maybe I can find a better job, a job that's less stressful and less hours and all the things. And I came across a job description which called to me. It was as if they were using my name. Anyway, I learned more about this woman and the company that she had, and in that process, I realized that I needed the gift of healing that her process gives. And so I said to her, "Look, I'm applying for this job, but I don't really care if you give it to me or not. I just need to do this process. So find me someone I can do this process with." And she did, and I did, and the healing happened within 3 weeks, and I was back on top of the world, and I did go to work for her, and 3 days later, I said to her, "I need to learn how to do this," and she said, "Fucking oath you do. You have to do this, and you have to take this to birthing women." We swear a lot in Australia. And so so she said, "You have to take this to women with birth trauma." And I have. That's what I do with it now. So it's been a few years since that journey began for me in terms of true healing. And here I am on a mission to make the world a better place for families.
Well, that is quite a roller coaster of an experience, I'll have to say. I have always looked at women who have given birth as just being so strong because I've heard so many horror stories about giving birth. And I don't have kids. I've never given birth before, so I don't even know what that experience is like, but I see like mommy bloggers post on YouTube about their experiences, and some are really good and some are really bad. And then you hear stories from people that are in your family or even your friends who have given birth. And I feel like you just hear so many negative things about birth. And you yourself said that you've had negative experiences, but you've also had beautiful experiences. What were some of the things that distinguished the experiences from being negative from being positive?
That's a great question because the pain is relatively similar in both experiences. You know, it's hard work. Giving birth is hard work. And certainly giving birth by cesarean is not the easy option. You have to recover from major surgery with a newborn. At least when you're doing the work in a vaginal birth, you're doing all the work. The hard work is usually done before the baby's born, right? So you're not having to do the majority of the pain with the baby as you are with the cesarean. So there's no easy option. Every option has a component of challenge. I remember doing a doula course in 2006 with Terry Schilling, who at that point was teaching with Dona, and she said, and it stuck with me. She said, "Your job as a doula is to think in everything you do about how this woman will remember how she was treated." And that's the essence of where birth trauma occurs or doesn't occur. Over 90% of my clients who come to me for birth trauma are actually those that have experienced obstetric violence. Now, obstetric violence is a reasonably new term, and it can occur when any maternity care provider, it could be a nurse, a midwife, a doctor, whatever, coerces, cajoles, disempowers, questions you in a way that makes you feel inferior, there can be obviously violence that occurs, doing an episiotomy without consent, even things like coming into the room and saying, well, we're going to do a vaginal exam now so we can see how far along you are. Well, that's actually not asking for consent. It's actually not giving you the opportunity to have informed consent. It's telling you what they're going to do. And that's not okay. They have a legal requirement to actually ask permission and to provide you with the pros and cons of any intervention. So for most people, the way they remember the birth experience, because partners and dads can experience birth trauma as well, and it usually comes down to how they remember being treated on the day. Because you can have a birth become a C-section and that be traumatic, or you can have a birth become a C-section and it be a smooth, easy, necessary thing that doesn't cause ongoing trauma. The difference is in how the woman is treated and how much control she is given in that time. And respect is a big part of that. So most women will talk about how crappy the experience was. And often, if you dig far enough, it comes down to, oh, I had to have an induction. I had to have this. I had to have that. They actually don't have to have anything. Nobody is ever going to come to your home, collect you in a big white van, and take you to the hospital for an induction. You do not have to do anything, right? But the way that they
Right.
were spoken to left them feel like they had no choice.
So it's not necessarily about the process itself of giving birth. It's just the experience that you have and the team that you have to support you through the experience. Long story short is what you're saying.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. It comes down to the support, who and how it all happens. We very, very infrequently do catastrophic events occur. And sometimes I hear women's stories and catastrophic things have occurred, but they've occurred because of the interventions that the woman was given before that happened. So very often we are being saved from the very things that we've that have occurred because of all the interventions to save us from one thing. I remember thinking a couple of decades ago, my sister-in-law was telling me how many medications she was on. She was on like 17 medications, but 10 of them were to overcome the symptoms of 7 of them, right? Like,
Mhm.
so interventions comes with risk, just as normal birth does, but every intervention comes with its own set of risk, and then you've got to do other interventions to mitigate those risks. And if you don't have, and then sometimes things still happen and then they saved you, but had they not done the intervention in the first place, maybe an induction because it was Easter coming up. That's how my cesarean happened. It was almost Easter, so we better induce you. You don't want me to be away. He wasn't there anyway. So but those things can cause as many issues, but it leaves a woman feeling disempowered.
Got it. Got it. Well, I wanted to quickly shift, if you don't mind, to the fear of giving birth. And I'm curious to ask questions about this because personally, I am somebody who fears the idea of giving birth, like the pain, just the entire experience. Why is it that women like me have these fears of giving birth, minus, everything negative that you may hear from the outside? What are some other reasons why other women may feel like they have this fear?
Well, I think a good portion of it comes from culture, obviously, and what they feel that they or what they think they know about birth and or what they genuinely don't know about birth. Sometimes it's fear of the unknown that causes the majority of that. And if you think back 300 years ago, every young woman would have been at a birth. Every young woman would have seen birth happen in her community somewhere. It would have been a sister, an aunt, her mother, the woman next door. Women supported women during birth, and so women girls grew up experiencing what giving birth was like. And so they didn't go into their own birth having never witnessed a birth before. So that's it. That unknown is very, very big. If what they do know is only from TV shows, books, maybe the occasional, YouTube clip or whatever, then they're not going to have a necessarily real experience of it. And having a real experience of birth, seeing it unfold in a hands-on way actually makes a big difference. And can I tell you, most labor and delivery nurses and most obstetricians have never seen normal physiological birth either. They come out of their internships and their registry, as registrars and so on. They come out having never actually seen a normal physiological birth from beginning to end. And for an obstetrician, that's not their job. Their job is not to support a normal physiological birth. They're surgeons. They're supposed to be there for when shit happens. But if our nurses and midwives haven't seen normal physiological birth either, and they don't know what normal looks like, how are they supposed to support physiological birth? So, for a lot of women, not knowing what it looks like, not knowing how it occurs, and not having the support creates the fear. Now, my eldest daughter had a baby 7 months ago, and in our home and in my family, birth at home is kind of what we do now, right? So, I had 2 babies at home. My sister had 3 of her 4 babies at home. My cousin had 1 of her 2 babies like, the people around my daughter, as well as a lot of the clients, obviously, that she's interacted with over my doula career, a lot of them have given birth at home. But her upbringing said that birth is normal, birth is doable. Yep, hard work, no question, but it's doable. And so there was no fear going into that birth. And she rocked it and came out the other side going, wow, like, how amazing am I to be able to do that thing, right?
Yeah.
So she had confidence in her ability, but on the other stage, it wasn't like, well, I'm so good because I just did that. It was like, that's what it's supposed to be, right? That was what I was supposed to do. I did the thing and it's done. And so for her, having that extra information is what helped her not have fear. And then, of course, having the support of people who 100% believed in her ability, who believed what she did about birth. Fear going in can also be a lack of ability to listen to our body. We're really good in Western culture at particularly telling little girls that they don't know what they're talking about and not listening to their body. We are not good at helping our children listen to their body cues. Are you tired? What does your body say? Are you hungry? What does your body say? And from the time they're in school or daycare, we're telling them when to sleep and when to eat. We're not asking them to listen to their body and say, oh, I'm feeling tired. I might go have a nap now. Or I actually don't feel like I can finish eating that. So I'm not going to. And so what we do is we diminish their body autonomy and their ability to listen to their own bodies. And so if you don't know what your body's capable of and how to listen to it, you're going to really be behind the 8 ball in terms of preparing for a birth. So as a culture, we start that with mums right from the word go. We say, well, you have to pee on our stick, right? Or you have to do our blood test so that we know you're really pregnant. I peed on a stick. I'm nauseous. I haven't got my period. I know I'm pregnant. But we have to medicalize it right from the very first appointment that a woman might have with her care provider. We take away her power. And what that then says is, well, I'm not the expert. I don't know anything. I need to leave this in the hands of those who do. And that's a scary thing.
Yeah. Like you said, if you are born into feeling safe and if you are born feeling very positive about birth, that makes a lot of sense that you would probably have better expectations for it than somebody who maybe heard all the fears or watched too many Hollywood movies about giving birth and how horrible it was. But what are some ways that you can help women or that you currently do help women who fear birth? What are some ways that you can help them fear less or to just relieve their anxiety if they didn't grow up in an environment to feel comfortable and safe with birth?
Yeah. So I guess there's two answers to that. It depends on whether they've had a baby before or not. Okay. So when I'm working with a mum to be, so somebody who hasn't yet had a baby, and this might be even before they conceive, ideally before they conceive, we do this work so that they go into their whole pregnancy without the fear and anxiety. But the first thing is to actually reset that nervous system and to rewrite the subconscious core beliefs that they hold about themselves and their body and their abilities. So very often what's sitting in the background is a lack of confidence because of the beliefs they have about the world that they grew up with, that they were born with, and so the very first thing is to rewrite those. The second would be to take any pressure in the balloon of life. So, any distressing events and so on, and really take the pressure out of that balloon. What happens then is when things happen, if things happen that are distressing, they have the space in the balloon to deal with it. And then it doesn't become traumatic. It might be you know, it's less likely to trigger things like anxiety, depression, PTSD, and so on. So, if we can clear that balloon, we can make it much easier for women to move through that experience without fear. And when we introduce them to who they really are, and we allow them to understand their authentic self and their power as a person, then they go into that experience far more connected and far more intuitive. They trust themselves, and that makes a huge difference when it comes to birthing a baby. Now, if they've already had a baby, we're going to do all of that and we're going to heal the first experience that often will come up and rear its head again in the next experience. So, unless we heal that past experience, very, very often it's birth where we see that again. And it usually starts to become truly fear generating in the third trimester. Doing the TRTP process that I do, we can clear all that in 15 days. So you can pretty much come to me almost at any time in the pregnancy and we can deal with it before you're ready to give birth, right? So, and I have dealt with women, at that sort of 37, 38 week mark, and they're like, "Oh, I need to do this now before I have this baby." And that's a good thing, right? So, yeah.
Yes, lots of support and education is super important. I think that's also part of the problem. It's not something they necessarily teach you super in depth in school. But I know for one thing, if I ever decide to have children, I'm going to call it Philippa because I feel like she just has this calming aura about giving birth and she makes it sound so like magical and easy. And for me, it's like, oh my goodness, like I do not even want to think about giving birth. So I know I'm going to have her on speed dial if I ever change my mind in the future.
It's big and it's hard work, but you still got the message that it was easy. Isn't that funny?
You tie a little bow on it, like it's a little gift. So a big gift with a nice little bow on it, I should say. But I wanted to ask you a question. So I ask all of
Sure.
my guests at the end of the episode, how can you choose to be bold going forward, whether it be personal or in your business?
It's a great question. I think when it comes to birth and parenting, I think in order to be bold, one needs to be able to operate from love and acceptance and intuition as opposed to fear and instinct. We talk about instinct and intuition interchangeably often, but they're two different things. Instinct is about survival, intuition is about compassion and love. To sit in intuition means that we have to be bold because sometimes we have to make decisions from a place of deep knowing. Intuition is deep knowing. It's not reactive instinct. That's about survival. If we want to thrive, we have to sit in intuition but that takes boldness, that takes courage. And so I guess the challenge that I would say is if you want to be bold as a parent and as a person, start looking at how can you respond from intuition and live from intuition as opposed to instinct.
I love that. That's a great response. Thank you so much for sharing.
You are welcome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And we're kind of nearing time, but last but not least, what would you like to promote that you want people to know about that you do?
Yeah. Okay. So I have a number of offerings. The crux of my business is around that TRTP, the Richard's trauma process, the modality that clears the trauma, distress, or stressful events and really allows a person to go to that calm space and live from a place of calm and intuition. So I think all people should do this process. I think it's beneficial for everyone on the planet, whether you resonate with having trauma or not. I'm starting a parenting course, so an 8-week parenting program. So it'll run concurrently through the year after the first one in February. It'll run every few weeks. It's an 8-week course. And I also have some ebooks and so on available, as well as a couple of courses coming out on my new app, which should be available about the time that this podcast airs, which will be great. So yeah, find my Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, website, all the things, and everything will be available somewhere on any of those.
Absolutely. I'll make sure I post her social media in the description. So everyone's listening, you're welcome to go on over to her social media page, take a listen to her content, read what she has going on. She's a very educated, smart woman. And like I said, I would trust her with my own potential birthing situation if that ever comes up. But I really do admire your strength around this topic. I feel like there's so many women that need this kind of support right now and need to understand that there are positive options out there and it doesn't always have to be a bad, scary experience. So thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your knowledge and your wisdom.
Oh, you are very welcome. And I just love that, that by coming on these, it's why when people share my stories, when people share my posts and so on, it just reaches so much more of an audience, people I would never normally reach. And it's such a pleasure to be able to share this kind of thing with you all.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I genuinely do appreciate your time and I hope to bring you on again. I feel like a half hour isn't long enough to talk about this, so I'm sure I'll be bringing you back in the future to talk about something similar. So again, thank you so much for being on today. And thank you everybody who stopped by to listen to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it inspiring and helpful. And stay tuned for future episodes coming out every single Monday. Thank you so much. And that's a wrap on another episode of Boldly You. I hope you're feeling inspired, motivated, and ready to make some bold moves in your own life. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Connect with us on social media. Share your own bold moments, your challenges, and your victories. We want to hear from you. Until next time, this is Destiny Mackey, urging you to be you and be bold.